Okay, I had some questions about how I attach my bases to the signs that I cut. So I thought I would do a little video here today explaining the process. It's really very simple, but I'll go through it anyways to give you newer people who are not familiar with this process the system that I use. Alright, I have here a little base that I cut out of a 2x4 actually. Trimmed it down and sanded it, rounded over the edges. This is going to be a layered base, and I usually make some kind of custom cut base, and this is going to be a part of the process here. So I want this base to be nice and heavy duty. It's going to be for this sign, the Avengers, which is an action figure sign, and I thought a nice heavy base, really dynamic looking, would be effective. So I cut this piece of 2x4 and got that ready for the bottom of the base. The first layer on the top I cut from cherry. It's a very nice piece that I had, and I shaped it into a rather radical looking piece. I thought it would fit the quality of the Avengers sign. So this is about maybe a little more than 1/4 of an inch thick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this down to the top of the 2x4 piece, pine. I think it's a nice contrasting wood for it. And then I'm going to take the actual Avengers sign, which in this case was cut from 3/4 inch pine, and I'm going to just glue that right down on top of this section and make like a little sandwich here. And then we'll take some clamps and put it together so that it will stay down nice and firm until it dries. So let's get the process going. First thing we're going to do is the bottom of the cherry board. Just put a little bit of glue around here. You don't need a lot of glue. Some people just swamp these things. The problem is, if you do that, when you put it down on the board, you get a lot of bleed out. And you can wipe it up, of course, but you want to try to avoid as much of that as possible. So I just rub that out with my finger. Get it spread around nicely. And then I don't use any specific measurements, just sort of eyeball it. When I rounded over the edges of this 2x4 piece, I left these edges straight on the back so that that would firmly fit right against it. And that makes a nice compact layer on top there. Okay. The boards have all been sanded down, of course, and they're all ready to go. Now with the Avengers sign, I'm going to just take a little bit of glue and put it on the back, on the bottom here. And again, just simply do what I did with the other one. Rub it around with my finger. Don't need a lot of glue, remember. And then just take it and place it down on top. Now you can overlap the cut edges, or you can firmly put it toward the back. Got to be a little creative. Do whatever you think is best. Push that down so it firmly sets. Leave it there for a few minutes. I don't use any screws on these signs, these smaller signs. If I were doing a bigger sign, I probably would. But the smaller signs, the glue is really strong enough. How do I know this? Well, I haven't done any scientific tests, but I've done hundreds of signs, and very, very rarely does the glue separate enough to loosen the sign from the base. It's very unlikely to happen. And I have had the occasion where I wasn't paying attention, accidentally put the sign on backwards, and after it dried I noticed it. Took me a while, and I had to remove it. and it was a job to get that loose. I'll tell you, you can't just snap it off. I had to use some heat and then very carefully pry underneath the sign to finally eventually pop it off. But it was a real task to do that. So I wouldn't worry too much about them coming apart once you've got them together. And once you got this thing down, put a clamp on each end. And sometimes I'll put a clamp in the middle if it looks like it's necessary. Okay, we're just going to let this sit here and dry now for a while. Put something up under it so that it won't topple over. And once it's dried, we'll take it to the spray area and we'll put some sealer on it. Won't use any paint. You can, of course, paint it, but I think it looks nice, natural wood with a silhouette effect. We'll come back and take a look at this later on. Okay, once you've got your sign all put together, you're going to want to seal it, at least I do anyways, with a Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch 2X Ultra Cover Gloss Clear. Seals, protects, and revitalizes. I've used this quite a bit, and it works very nicely on the signs. The thing is, when you're spraying a sign, you don't want to spray it just standing up like this, because if you spray it here, it's likely the sealer, until it dries, is going to start to drip down and leave some ripples on your sign. It's okay if you do it very carefully, slowly, and don't put too much on, but you got to be careful about how much you actually do put on. So what I like to do is I like to lay the sign down. However, when you lay the sign down, you still got a problem, because if the base is a little higher than the actual sign placement, you're still going to have a bit of an angle here with the sign laying down like that. And if you spray it, still some of the spray could drip down and leave you with ripples on there. Especially if you do like the back, for example, it would be, again, very difficult to keep that from dripping down. So what I did was I came up with these little wedges. I cut them out on my saw. It's about a 45-degree angle, and I used them to hold the sign up at a nice level placement. So I'll put the sign like that, putting it on a piece of wood rather than on the actual newspaper, and take the wedge and just put it up, and you can move it in as far as you need to, or back, whichever, so that the sign is at a nice level placement. I would do it on both sides just to make sure it doesn't fall down. So now the sign is nice and level. You still have the problem of drip up here, but you could hold back and not spray that part until later on when you can stand it straight up. Or you can do that very carefully. So what we're going to do is we're going to spray this Avengers sign and see what happens. When you do put this spray on, it does tend to bring out the color of the wood and the grain of the wood a lot more so than it was just plain wood. I'm going to not do the base as much because I want to have that flat too. When I do it, I'll do that in an upright position. But here you can put as much on as you want and make it as thick a coat as you'd like, and that's going to dry very nicely and it won't run. Okay, so we'll take a look at this when it's all done, another shot, and you get an idea of what it'll look like when it's finished.